I already told you that we didn't serve beggars. The dish crashed into the ground with a rumble, spreading steaming food through tiles. Clara did not flinch. He took a step forward in front of the trembling old man, protecting him with his body as if his apron could block the shame. The rain hit the windows. The few clients who were looked away by pretending not to hear anything. He put his hand in his pocket. So, neglect it from my tips, but that is not enough. R, farewell. Get out. The next morning, just when the sun broke into the clouds, 200 soldiers with their gala uniforms were silent in front of that same restaurant. They hadn't come to drink coffee, they had come for her. Clara James was not the type of woman in which people noticed. He didn't try to be. At 32, he had become accustomed to living in the spaces between conversations, filling cups of coffee, cleaning counters, and offering silent smiles that were not corresponded. In a town like Richfield, Kentucky, where the factory had closed and the painting of each facade seemed to part in slow motion, being invisible was less a choice than a survival ability. He wore his brown apron as armor, and his horsetail was always tied tight enough to remove the weight of the day from him. Most of the mornings opened Billy Dine that the sun came out. Most of the nights closed it long after the last habitual client had, marched by dragging the feet. No one ever asked him why he was double shift. No one ever asked him much of anything. But Clara had her reasons. And all of them went back to a small apartment with a broken kitchen window, a toured opium-ed cat called Smokey, and a shoebox full of war medals under their bed. He had been raised by his grandfather, Henry James, a veteran of the Korean War with his back, a more sharp tongue and a heart as tender as the cornbread. He had intervened when his parents disappeared in his own storm of errors and had raised Clara with stories of discipline, dignity, and doing the right thing, even when no one applauds you. Especially then, he used to say Clara as he snorted his old pipe. The goodness is not a noisy, it is silent, such as sweeping the porch before the guests arrive, even if they never appear. When he died 3 seconds ago, the world lost one of his best listeners. Clara did not cry much in the funeral, not because it didn't hurt, but because he knew he would have wanted her to stay strong. Stay erected, he used to whisper, even when you feel small. Since then, she had taken that fortress and buried her deeply. He did the morning and the night. Overdue services, half of a lease, and an owner without patience. By the time he dragged his suitcase and a box of essential items to a rented room on top of a mechanical workshop, Smokey Molo once rubbed his face full of scars against his calf and curled up in a lined drawer with a kitchen cloth. Clara stared at the roof that night with one hand resting on the side of the cat and promised herself that she would overcome him once again. The new place was just a step above a storage room. A plug sparked if you looked bad. The bathing tap shouted like a banshee in its savings. Exactly $6,438 and decreasing. But he still got up at 5 in the morning and walked to the restaurant in the rain. He kept smiling at customers who left coins as a tip and continued to take Smokey a tablespoon of tuna of the reservations of the restroom every time he could sneak. People like to say that Clara James was a quiet girl, but what they really wanted to say was that I didn't ask for anything. He didn't complain when someone spilled coffee in his shoes. He did not flinch when the chef barking orders through a cloud of fat. He did not argue when his payment check came short and the manager told him to thank having a job. But what they did not see was that Clara realized everything. He realized which regular customers seemed more alone after finishing their food. He realized when the new dishwasher had bruises that he could explain, and especially realized those who entered fleeing from the rain, asking only water and S ever dare to look her in the eye. His life was a mosaic of small benefits and invisible charges, and carried them all without complaining. Sometimes, late at night, he held his grandfather's identification plates in one hand and Smokey in the other and whispered, "We are fine. We are still fine." But the truth was that she was tired, not only tired to the bones, but tired of the soul by so much simulation. For swallowing so much injustice, for observing the world as it remained on the sidelines. He never asked for a miracle. He just expected the roof not to drip again. And yet, in that rainy afternoon, A Tuesday as quiet as any other, when the restaurant door creaked when he opened and a soaked and trembling man with an old military coat, he entered the limping. Clara did not see a stranger. She saw her grandfather. And at that moment, something changed. Not in the world, but within it. It rained to pictures when the door creaked open. The wind swept a burst of cold air through the restaurant, and the head of each client turned instinctively, even if only for a moment. A man was standing on the threshold, soaked to the bones. His coat, once military green, now hung turns, heavy by water. A faded badge of the United States Army barely clung to Manga. His beard was gray, irregular, careless. His left leg dragged slightly behind him, bandaged with capes of gauze. They had seen better days. His hands, trembling while taking off a wool hat for soaked, were covered with calluses, the knuckles full of scars and swollen. He held a small paper bag near his chest, as if he were glass. Clara was behind the counter, cleaning a stain of Rebel ketchup. He did not flinch. He saw how he stopped insecure, scanning the room, not in search of a table, but permission to exist. Most of the other diners turned around suddenly, absorbed in your coffee or your phones. The waitress of the previous turn had once said, "People like that do not want help, they want attention." Clara had never believed that. People thought they usually only try to be invisible. He crawled up to a reserved in the furthest corner in silence, respectfully. He did not sit down. He only stood by him with one hand supported by support, as if he needed his support. Clara approached, with the towel still in the hand, his already wet apron of his previous turn. "Good night," he said gently. "Can I bring you something hot?" The man did not look at her at the beginning. His eyes were stuck on the ground, as if he feared that his presence could make him thrown. When he finally raised his head, Clara caught the unmistakable brightness of pain and pride fighting for a space in the same tired look. "Just a cup of hot water, ma'am," he said quietly. "And maybe if you have a bread beggar, let go." His voice broke, not for weakness, but by the weight of asking. Clara's breath stuck in her chest. He had heard almost those same words before his grandfather, recounting the time a stranger fed him on a rainy night in Busan in 1952. He nodded once. "I will see what I can do." Back in the kitchen, a returned order waited under the heat lamp. Chicken with intact dumplings. He took it carefully, served him on a plate with extra bread with butter, and served a cup of freshly made black coffee. He slid in a tray with a small fabric napkin and returned as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "This is just returned," he said by placing him in front of him. "It's still hot." He looked up surprised. "I can't pay." She interrupted him with a smile. "It is already paid and coffee runs on my own." The man stared at the tray as if he were not sure whether to cry or flee, then slowly extended his hand and surrounded the cup with his fingers. "It reminds me of my wife," he murmured. "She used to do things like that." He said that everyone deserved heat, especially those who have lived too cold. Clara blinked hard, trying to contain her own tears. From the other side of the room, the owner of the restaurant Los Fio. He narrowed his eyes, his mouth already forming the words that would resonate stronger than any storm outside. But at that moment, I was not thinking of rules or repercussions. I was thinking of man in front of her. Someone who had clearly fought for a country that now passed it. Overlooked without a second look. While ate slowly and grateful, he held the fork as if he weighs 1,000 pounds. He chewed every bite as if it were the first solid food in days. Clara noticed how she sat erect, despite the pain in his leg. He didn't complain, he didn't beg, he didn't blame. When he finished, he looked up with his eyes crying and whispered, "He's just saved a soul tonight, lady." He could have been broken, but not forgotten. He put his hand in the inside pocket of his coat and pulled out a plaque of oxidized military identification, the chain de Solagerie and opaque. Putting it in the palm of her hand, she said, "My name is Ely Tarner. If not surviving this winter, I want someone to know that I existed." And so he got up and disappeared in the storm. His silhouette swallowed by the clear gray was frozen, the warm plaque in his hand despite the cold. He didn't know what he would bring tomorrow. The rent was still pending. Smokey still needed food. For the first time in a long time, he felt that he had just done something that mattered, even if no one else realized. The sound of the main door opening suddenly broke the moment as a crystal. Clara barely turned before the voice arrived, sharp, strong, and soaked with disgust. "What devils do you think you're doing?" It was Wayne Becker, the restaurant owner. His corpulent figure filled the kitchen threshold, his eyes fixed on the empty dish in front of the now vacant seat of Eiley Turner. The steam of the finished food still floated in the air, as if trying to defend it. Clara remained erect, the identification plate saved in her apron pocket. "He was a veteran, sir," he said quietly. "He asked for hot water and a bread begis. I gave him food that was going to throw away." Wayne's voice rose more this time, enough for the handful of clients to turn their heads and then look quickly. "This is not a clear charity work. T. I have said it before. If people see us feeding free streets, they will think that we are a charity dining room." A middle-aged couple at the corner was silent, stirring their coffee with an exaggerated slowness. No one looked into her eyes. Nobody spoke. Clara inhaled deeply. "I paid coffee. Can you discount it from my tips?" Wayne hit her hand with her hand against the counter with a sound like a shot. "I said no. Draniel Lajro, you just made me look soft in front of customers. You can't decide how I run this place." Then came the final blow. "You are fired. Right now, pack your things and get." His finger pointed to the door as a dagger. The restaurant cooled more at that time, not because of the rain of outside, but for what was missing inside. Decency, support, anyone willing to say a word in their defense. Clara's hands trembled while the apron was unleashed. It was not surprised, not really. Disappointed, yes. Wound, absolutely. But surprised, right? What stung worse than the screams was the silence of everyone else. The corner woman leaned towards her husband and whispered, "That's what happens when you bring problems inside." Someone more Caraspia moved uncomfortably in his seat and read the menu again as if none of that imported. No one got up. No one said she was right. No one even thanked. He went out to the torrential rain, his tarp shoes soaked in seconds, his hair crushed, his arms clinging to his bag, but his spine remained straight, as his grandfather had taught him. Outside, he stopped under the awning, with his heart beating hard. He didn't cry. He couldn't afford it. Not here. Not now. A whisper caught his attention from the alley next to the restaurant. The veteran appeared once again, limbing her with effort. His breathing was superficial, but his eyes still wore that silent fire. "I saw what happened," he said. "I should not have let you pay a price for me." Clara denied, with the head. "You did nothing wrong." He put his hand back in his coat and put something in his hand. Its identification plate. "You just saved a shattered soul, daughter," he said in a hoarse voice. "You reminded me that it was not invisible." Before she could talk, he turned around and disappeared again in the rain. That night, Clara sat in her tiny room. Smokey curled up against his hip. His wet clothes hung awkwardly on a chair. The only light came from the street lamppost, filtering through the blinds. On the broken screen of his phone, he updated his bank account, 421. The rent won in 10 days. I had no job, medical insurance, no support plan, but I had something else. Courage, and strangely in a world that had just rejected it, that felt like a kind of wealth. Took the identification plate, reading the name recorded in your worn metal. Turner Eli F472 serial number. The rest was discolored, almost illegible. Drew the letters with the thumb, wondering where it would have served, what would I have lost, and why this country, this town, could forget it so easily. The next morning, his world changed again. I didn't even know that a teenager had been filming until he arrived on the internet. A trembling and granulated video filmed from the other side of the restaurant showed Clara standing with quiet resolution, the owner's finger pointing to the door, her tall and ugly voice. For noon it had spread like gunpowder, but not in the way that... I expected. The comments were brutal. The rules are the rules. I should have asked for permission first, but this is not the first time you give food. Maybe he has been stealing. Her old coworkers eliminated her from her friends. One sent him a private message, always trying to be heroine. How are you doing with that now? Clara requested work in 3 other restaurants that day. None even called her. In one place, the manager looked at her, paused, and said softly, "We can't take risks." "Call attention, honey." Nothing personal. Another did not even let her. The application. They simply returned and nodded towards the door. At sunset, she wandered around the center, cold, wet, exhausted. The identification plate weighed in her coat pocket. He passed by a bus stop, and there, curled up under a plastic canvas maid, the chest and the others snuggled around that same paper bag. He left a small package wrapped in newspaper, half sandwich, everything he had, and whispered, "Thanks for reminding me." Then he turned around and moved away, without knowing that a black military vehicle had stopped at the corner. Inside, a man in uniform saw her move away and made a phone call. The rain ceased just before dawn. He left behind a free people in silence. The street shone with thin puddles, reflecting the first golden light that made its way between the low clouds, the center of Richfield. He still slept, dark windows, traffic lights flashing yellow in the air, thick with the smell of wet pavement and something else. Anticipation. Exactly at 6 in the morning, the rumble began. Not engines, not steps, but of presence. One by one, the black SUVs entered the narrow main street, forming a silent procession that stopped in front of Billy Dine. The first to go down was a man with a uniform of the United States Army impeccably ironed, his full chest of medals, square shoulders, like a man who still wore a battlefield on his back. He stopped in front of the restaurant door and waited, and behind him, as a display of discipline and reverence, a row of soldiers, rows and rows of them arrived, dressed in full gala uniform, emerged from vehicles in the side streets. Some were from the Army, other Marines, others from the Navy and the Air Force. All stopped in perfect training throughout the entrance of the restaurant, spreading through the block, silent and motionless. No one had to tell them to stop and look at. The cars decreased speed, the pedestrians froze, the merchants looked through their windows. In a town where nothing never happened, this was something. Inside the restaurant, Wayne Becker had just finished replenishing the napkins when the bell rang on the door. He looked up and almost dropped the glass he held. The uniformed officer was erect on the threshold, with hard eyes, the illegible expression. "I would like to talk to the owner," said the man. Wayne took a suddenly pale step. "I am the owner." More people had leaked from the street, now attracted to whispers and camera phones. The multitude outside grew. The officer took off his cap. "My name is Colonel Matthew Turner, son of Ella Turner." Silence creaked like thunder. Wayne's mouth opened, but words didn't come out. Colonel Turner continued, his quiet but authoritarian voice. "He, man who humiliated here yesterday, he's the reason I am alive." The air thickened. Even the kitchen had stayed still. In 2007, during my 3rd deployment in Iraq, our convoy was ambushed. My transport was reached. 12 of us are trapped. His beggar loaded me 3 miles under enemy fire with shrapnel in his own leg. He refused to receive treatment until we were safe. He put his hand in his coat and took out a plasticized mention. "The Silver Star. This is yours." Wayne's eyes moved quickly, looking for someone, anyone, defending him. No one moved. "He refused to receive help for years," Turner said, with his voice slightly broken. "After my mother died, her TPT worsened. Disappeared. We looked for it for months. And now," he said, approaching the counter, "we found him fed and protected here. Not by the system, not by the people, but by a waitress, one to which you fired." There were murmurs outside, the phones capturing each word, hashtags, and forming. Michael Rutherford won medals with which most men only dream. Turner continued, returning to a more constant pace. "But once he told me that the medals do not feed the hungry. So their silver star to buy food for a homeless family. He paused and then added, "The waitress that defended him yesterday reminded me of the country he thought he had lost." At that time, a young cape entered through the door holding a small black case. Inside the same metal as Ili committed. Turner turned to the door. "Bring it here." Clara had no idea what was happening until someone knocked on the door of her rented room on the garage. A local reporter, blushed and breathless, was there with a team of cameras behind her. "They are looking for you," said the soldiers. "The whole block is closed. Colonel Turner, you have to come now." Clara thought she was still dreaming, but the crowd, the looks, the uniforms. Greetings. Everything was very real. When he approached the restaurant, the row of soldiers separated slightly. Then, suddenly, everyone raised their right hand to their forehead. 200 soldiers greeting her. A clear waitress froze. A knot was made in his throat. His breathing was cut. No one spoke. Nobody needed to do it. Colonel Tenier took a step forward by presenting the medal. "My father wanted you to have this." Clara shook her head. "Can't. It is not mine." Turner placed it gently in the hand. "Now it is." The consequences were quick. The restaurant closed the next day. Suppliers canceled orders. The staff renounced. Veterans groups made pickets at the entrance. Wayne Becker disappeared from the town in a matter of weeks, but Clara did not roam. He did not make statements. He did not publish on social networks. He simply did what he knew best to do, serve with silent strength. Only now he had help. A nonprofit organization directed by veterans. He offered full-time work, managing a new community cuisine. The soldiers I had met that day, many returned as volunteers. The row outside its kitchen grew, but so did the heat inside. And on the corner of his office, there was a small wooden box. Inside, a folded flag, a silver star, and a tangled identification plate that never left his pocket. It did not happen overnight. Justice never does. Slides slowly, like light. In the morning through the alphyzer of a silent, constant, unstoppable window. The restaurant where Clara James worked once was now dark and empty. Its 24-hour neon sign had cooled, and a notice of rent, bleached by the sun, waved behind the window. For years he had served truckers, town towns, and tourists equally. But after that morning, the morning of the soldiers, never served anyone again. On the other side of the town, something new had thrown roots. In an old warehouse that once stored broken vending machines, the lights now remained lit late at night. The laugh resonated through the halls. The smell of chili, cornbread, and hot coffee floated through the doors. Clara was in the heart of everything. The community cuisine of Richfield, operated by a nonprofit organization founded by veterans, had offered Clara the manager position a week after the incident. She hadn't asked for it, she never sought attention, but people like Colonel Turner had ensured that his history was heard not to receive applause, but to remind the country how real courage is. On paper, Clara was now in charge of the kitchen. He really felt more like a family than like a job. Exoldados peeled potatoes with single mothers. Secondary volunteers served soup with retired nurses. Smokey, the cat, now a loved element, watched everything from the alphyzer of a window as a general tired of the war with a good eye know and a tender heart. But the most notable moment came a week after the greeting that changed everything. They were shortly after 4 in the afternoon. The kitchen was finishing the day when the door creaked when it opened and a small child of no more than 7 or 8 years entered. He had ash blonde hair, 2 large sneakers, and a serious expression. In one hand, he held a bent ticket carefully in thirds. In the other, a cookie wrapped in waxed paper and tied with a string. He walked directly to the counter and looked at Clara. "I saw you in the video," he said. "My grandfather was also a soldier. I used to help people, so I also wanted to help someone." He put the cookie and the dollar on the counter. Clara knelt beside her with her hands on her knees, trying not to cry. "Can I use this to help someone else?" "Drania," he asked. She didn't speak for a long moment. She couldn't. Instead, he put his hand to the heart in the same way that 200 soldiers had done so. Before, and nodded in silence, without speeches, without grandiloquent gestures, only an act of goodness echoing forward. Ellie Turner, the veteran who started everything, now had a roof on her head and regular attention in a nearby veterans' housing unit. He ran his voice that his son visited him often. Sometimes younger soldiers came just to sit and listen to their stories. Stories not only about battles abroad, but also about silent battles. Labrada is right here at home. Clara visited him when he could. They didn't say much. They didn't have to do it. She still wore her identification plate, still saved the silver star in a simple box next to her bed. Some nights passed his fingers at his edges and whispered the words his grandfather had once told him. Honor is not a noisy, it is silent. Over time, people would continue. The story would vanish from the headlines. The video would move down in the feed of yesterday's indignation. But those who had seen him, who had really seen him, would remember, not because Clara had risen, but because he did it when it was more difficult, because he did not expect anything in return. That in a world that too often forgets her silent heroes, she reminded everyone how dignity is when no one applauds. In a world that moves faster than most of us care to admit, it is easy to ignore the quiet moments, where the true character is revealed. Clara James did not march, she did not protect, she did not publish anything. All he did was offer a dish of hot food and a moment of dignity to a man who had already rolled out. And somehow that was enough to shake a whole town. This story is not just a waitress or a veteran. It is about us, how we choose to treat people when we believe no one is looking. It is about the value of goodness without cameras, the cost of doing. Correct when no one will applaud you for it. How many people have we overlooked in the supermarket, in the park bank, or even at our own family tables? How often do we let fear, politics, or pride speak higher than compassion? In the United States today, where loneliness is increasing and respect often feels like a lost art, Clara's story reminds us that honor is not always in a medal. Sometimes it is in a whisper. A coffee, a hot meal. We would love to know about you. Have you ever witnessed a moment like Clara? Have you ever defended someone when it was not easy? Share your thoughts in the comments below. His story could inspire another person to act. Thanks for spending time with us today. If this story touched his heart, consider giving him, subscribe, and share it with someone who still creates in silent courage. Here on our channel, we tell heart stories, sincere for those who have not forgotten what dignity means. Because some heroes do not use uniforms, some only use aprons.